Hello and welcome to another An Old Man Watches. And today I'm going to be talking about 2010 Japanese animated series High School of the Dead. And this show kicks off at the beginning of the high school semester. Student Takashi Komuro is having an awkward patch in his relationship with his lifelong friend Rei Miyamoto. And when Takashi goes up onto the school's roof to mope about, this thing, his teenage angst, he witnesses a zombie attack at the front of the school. His immediate reaction is to go warn Rei and his best friend Hisashi, whom Rei is dating. Thanks to this early warning, the trio begin their escape before panic spreads across the school as a whole, giving them a bit of an edge. Despite this, Hisashi is bitten in the process of escaping and begins to turn into one of them. A zombie. Takashi is forced to kill Hisashi, exposing the teenagers to the full horrors of the zombie plague. But he and Rei press on, teaming up with other students, including kendo expert Psycho and gun nerd Kota, to stay ahead of the undead menace. As the police and military are overwhelmed and civilization collapses around them, this scrappy group of teenagers set out across the city, somehow staying one step ahead of the zombies and the other menaces that emerge as they seek some kind of safe haven, somewhere to be safe. So, sounds like a pretty standard zombie thing, doesn't it? Except that it's high school teenagers. Well, yep. High School of the Dead is kind of that. It's an animated adaptation of the comic book of the same name, and it's sort of the beginning of a story that will never be completed, as the writer, Daisuke Sato, passed away in 2017, and the rest of the creative team decided not to continue without him. But I think it's got some things that are worth talking about, that set it apart from being just another piece of zombie media, I guess. So let's get stuck into what those are. So, first of all, and it really cannot be said loud enough, this is the fan-serviest fan service that ever served fans. There are at least 12 bra or panty shots in the opening credits of every episode. Just in the opening credits, 12 bra or panty shots. Now, generally speaking, fan service annoys me. It feels fundamentally dishonest, not to mention, juvenile and sexist, because on some level, to me, fan service is the creators of the work admitting that they don't think their product is worth viewing on its own merits. So here's some pandering to keep you watching. And, don't get me wrong, in High School of the Dead, this is still juvenile and sexist, because, it is basically, hey, ogle some animated ladies. But it's so gleefully, unrestrainedly, absurdly over the top about it, so blatant and just unashamed of what it is, that I find it much less annoying than I normally would, probably because it doesn't have that whiff of dishonesty about it. Fan service isn't a distraction from this product's weakness, it is the product. This is a show where the line, "You use my boobs as a brace for an AK-47, is completely on brand. And I kind of have to admire that sort of unabashed commitment to, juvenile sexuality. So yeah, at least it's honest about it. It's not disguising what it is. And I think, the image on screen makes it pretty clear what it is. Secondly, these days zombie media has gone through lots of reinventions and variations, and what kind of zombies is a factor in considering whether a particular piece of zombie media is for you or not. So High School of the Dead is very much in the Night of the Living Dead school of zombie apocalypse. The Walking Dead are generally slow and shambling, but they're also instantly everywhere, and they're very hard to kill. Where the zombies came from and how is not really a subject the show or the comic book much engages with. The characters ask the question, of course, but much like in Romero's seminal film, they have no real way to learn the answer. So it's an unanswered question. It's not something the show is particularly interested in engaging with. It's not the point. And that's fine. That's a perfectly reasonable way to approach zombie media, in my opinion, anyway. Other people may disagree. They might like to know the story behind. I think like the 30th anniversary edition of Night of the Living Dead, which does give an explanation for where the zombies come from, is a much worse film. Not just because it gives an explanation, but part of the reason it's a much worse film than the original is because it gives an explanation, in my opinion. The one thing that High School of the Dead does establish as its kind of own zombie lore is that in stating that them, as the kids call the undead, are largely blind but have acute hearing. And this is a simple but quite effective narrative decision, because it allows for tense scenes where the group tries to use stealth to slip past the zombies, excusing why doesn't that zombie notice them? Well, they're being quiet, is perfectly good reason for it. And it also creates an in-universe reason for why the group relies on melee weapons as much as they do. I mean, there's no point having one of your characters be a kendo master if you aren't going to let her do kendo, after all. And, by creating a situation where taking down a zombie silently is much preferable to taking down a zombie with lots of noise, it's a good reason to not use guns and to stick to melee weapons. So we get lots of kendo, we get lots of baseball bats, we get lots of axes and spears and the like. We also do get guns, and because one of the characters is a gun nerd, but gun nerds are used for everything has already gone to hell. We just have to do whatever we have to do to survive this next few seconds, and we're going to worry about the badness of making all that noise later. It's a nice, simple decision that creates a good dynamic for the show. If I was to run a zombie apocalypse role-playing game, I'd probably steal this whole don't make noise concept. And obviously, with movies like A Quiet Place, we've seen how don't make a sound can be used very effectively for tension. Now, that tension is not necessarily a major factor in High School of the Dead. This is not a deep show. It has very much a fan service first, action-oriented mentality. And it even includes a couple of characters in its main cast that are clearly mostly there for comic relief. So while it acknowledges the horror of the situation and it does have tense scenes, it focuses much more on the relationship dynamics of the group. If I was to give it a potted summary, I'd say this is much more a teen soap opera that happens to have zombies in it than a zombie show that happens to have main characters who are teenagers. The closest Western equivalent I can think of in terms of tone is maybe early episodes of The Chilling Adventures of Sabrina, though that show definitely sort of had a lot less bra and panty shots. It's not a fan servicey show, but it is a relationship show that happens to have zombies and evil magic in it. Overall, what this means for High School of the Dead is it has a much lighter feel than many zombie apocalypse stories. Now, that wasn't always true in the comic book on which this is based. That got rather more grim in later chapters, chapters that are not covered by this animated adaptation. But definitely in terms of the TV series, there's a lighter tone. It even manages to end on a reasonably upbeat note. So if you're looking for zombie media that's not the misery fest of something like The Walking Dead, and you're willing to accept that the show is going to spend an awful lot of time ogling its female characters, that may be a selling point for this show for you. Next time, we're going to talk about the provocatively titled The Devil's Whore, also known as The Devil's Mistress. I believe that was a US title. It's a little bit less provocative. This is a historical drama set in the English Civil War, specifically the one from the 1640s with Cavaliers and Roundheads, not any of the other wars that could have potentially claimed that title. But that's next time. In the meantime, thanks for watching this one, and I hope you enjoyed it.